Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. I am not Dr. Pat. I am Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I'm in for Dr. Pat today. And the topic of our hour is about grief and grief as a spiritual practice. And grief is not unknown to many of us, especially in this time of COVID. There have been so many unfortunate and immeasurable losses across the board for just about everyone in the country and across our world. This pandemic has really been hard for us all of us humans. And I want to talk about how I've been dealing with grief. And this came to me as an idea that I had about something in my life that I'm going to be sharing that I've been keeping under wraps, but also from Unity. Unity Village in Missouri sends out wonderful prayers and resource guides. And they were talking about grief and talking about COVID specifically. But that's how I kind of rounded out my idea today. So what am I grieving? So I've been talking on my show, Miles to Go, for the past few months about self-love, self-care, self-compassion, dealing with difficult feelings and not knowing what to do. So for about the past 6 months, and underneath that has been my own particular struggle. And I am a parent of a mentally ill child, and she has severe mental illness. And it's tough. There are times where I don't know what's going to happen next. I am unable to plan as one would with her future. I don't know if she's going to be stable from day to day. She's unable to do most things kids her age, early teens do. There are some things that she does do. But within that, I've had to grieve. I've had to accept the sadness that the picture that I had when I held her in my arms in that pink blanket when she was first born, those dreams have to go away. They have to die. The thoughts I had when she was in elementary school and she showed great promise with her art, which she still has, but what is she, how is she going to use her talent? How do I effectively plan her future with her? What can she do? As I said, right now she doesn't go to school. She's missed a lot of school. She's very disabled. What does that look like? So I've been walking through and wrestling with a lot of those questions, and I wanted to use today's show to kind of use this as a cathartic moment, but also to come out of the shadows and hopefully my story, my struggles and my triumphs can help support someone else that's out there that has a loved one, whether it be a spouse, a child, niece, nephew, cousin, what have you, that has something similar, because it's difficult. And I think given COVID, I think we as a culture are now turning an eye towards mental health, because the being indoors and losing contact and all that external stuff that we do as humans in terms of building and creating and sustaining community has really changed. So a lot of people are suffering, and a lot of people are suffering in silence. So I want to use this hour also to just bring to the fore, get out of the shadows. Don't suffer in silence. Mental health is as important as physical health and can have very strong and important bearing on our physical health. There's no reason to hide or be ashamed. Again, it's something that I think we as a culture, excuse me, don't really understand, or we've chosen not to understand mental health because it's scary. The things that happen can be quite frightening. And as a parent, I've seen my child in various situations that have been very off-putting, things I felt uncomfortable sharing. Um, and I didn't ignore them, but I didn't know what to do with it because it's difficult at times to get help. And especially when you have a young child, there's the thought that perhaps they'll grow out of it, which is true. But over time, these issues can snowball to the point where they become pronounced, and that's what happened to us when my daughter turned 11. A lot of her symptoms became much more pronounced, and I had to change my life. And my life became, instead of being a full-time professional, I had to become a stay-at-home mom. And that's happened over the course of 2 to 3 years. And that's changed our life both emotionally, physically, financially. And it's had me to look at different ways of looking at my career and work, which brought me to Dr. Pat and this show and my show and other projects that I have in the works. So there is some good there. And I see the highlights of how it changed the trajectory of our lives. But when I slow down in those still quiet moments, I still feel that grief. And I try to stuff it down with doingness. I'm a busy person. I encourage people to feel things and work through them and do so mindfully. However, this pain has been so heartbreaking, heart rendering. It's just I can't explain it. It's a broken heart, but in such a different way. It's not the grief that I felt when I was getting divorced. It wasn't the grief of other family members when they passed on. This is just there's it's the grief of promise. It's the grief of dreams and the inability to accept what is. And that's a key of mindfulness, which we talk about on my show a lot, is accepting what is. And I have resisted what is at every moment. I have resisted acceptance of this is what our life is today. I have resisted just thinking about what I wanted my child's future to be, the things that I wanted. And I realized in my grief, it's a lot about and that's okay. I am a recovering people pleaser, so I tend to do a lot for others so that I can gain love. And I feel that, something outside of me will make me feel better and I'll gain strength and love and appreciation. But I'm learning from this grief process that I need to take care of me. And I did some lip service, but I've also been doing a lot of work on self-care. But this is, to me, dealing with the grief is a different type of self-care. It's dealing with those really difficult emotions. And there's a lot of pieces to it. It's multifactored, where it's a lot of what I call sticky, icky, ooey gooey places. And you have to open yourself up to that. And there is a softening. And I think grief is that softening agent. It opens you up to that surrender. And that's the core focus of my show, how to lose to gate it all. And I hadn't really used that lens for this pain. So what I want to discuss this hour is maybe how do I open up myself to that softening? How do I open myself up to that pain? So we're going to be talking through acceptance, as I shared before, of what is, how to ask for help, how to get out of the shadows, get out of hiding, and then talking about resources with different support groups like NAMI or Mental Health America or MHA, and different types of coping skills. So I am Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I'm here on the Dr. Pat show, guest hosting today. And we're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. So stay tuned. I'll see you after the break. Hey everyone, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're here with Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I'm here this hour guest hosting for Dr. Pat. And today we're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. And I am becoming more public about my struggles and confrontation or acceptance of grief. I am grieving through my child's chronic mental illness, and I'm discussing that today. So if that's something that you are struggling with or need support with, please reach out to NAMI.org or mentalhealthamerica.org or MHA, as Mental Health Association is known as. And we're going to be talking about coping skills. And for this segment, we're going to be talking about acceptance. And I received something in the Daily Word, I believe, yesterday, which I thought was perfect for this show. And it's talking about acceptance. Acceptance is my path to peace. If I touch a rose's petals, I may delight in their soft, velvety texture. If I hold the bloom to my face, its sweet scent may make me smile. Grasping a rose by the stem and touching the thorns, however, may pierce my skin and cause me pain. The seasons of my life are like the rose, sweet and soft, as well as sharp and prickly. As I seek the rose's beauty and fragrance, so too must I accept its thorns. In my life, I have enjoyed pleasure and plenty, just as just as I have endured hardship and scarcity. Through times of joy and through times of sorrow, I am grateful for the presence of God within and all around me. I accept my life as I accept the rose, from the dewy rosebud to the rose's fullest bloom to the last withering petals. And I think that's a really pretty and strong metaphor, analogy for acceptance, because you have to take, as my mother used to say, the bitter and the sweet. So there's joy and there's sorrow. That's just the balance of our life and nature, right? You have to have a positive and a negative. So acceptance, how do you accept what is? And as a person that really focuses on mindfulness as just a core part of their journey, it's really getting still, focusing on the breath, and just relaxing into the present moment. And whenever that happens, you find that peace, because the power that you have in your life is always within the present moment. So whenever I'm having struggles with my child, if there's an outburst, or I have anger or fear or distrust with our health team or providers, I get to take a step back and take a breath. I don't have to have that answer. And when I feel as if, oh my God, what if it's this, or what if it's that, or I need to do this, or I need to do that, which kind of compounds the grief and the sadness with a doingness, taking that moment to take that inhale and that exhale, it just resets your brain and allows you to just focus. And it might be a couple of breaths until you can calm yourself. It might be putting your hand on your chest and on your belly, but taking that time just for yourself, just to get yourself to relax. Because otherwise you're in this, oh, what are we going to do? You know, the sky is falling and you're not able to see what is and what's happening. And once you're able to get into that settled place, you're able to see what's happening, and you can become present to the emotions that you have. And you can decide what you're going to do in that moment or not do. And it's kind of what I call my 3-step process. These are things that I have discovered in different parts of my life that are helpful. And then also many other mindfulness practitioners talk about this. I think for me to work through the grief, especially when those difficult emotions start to well up for me, usually in my chest and my throat, it's just breathing through them. And sometimes I can consciously become aware and deal with them. And other times I'm like, okay, I need to focus here, and I will come back to those emotions and I'll figure out how I want to resolve them. How am I going to get support with someone, like getting counseling for myself? Another part of acceptance is, as I said, with grief, it's mourning the loss of what you thought, your dreams, of what you thought your child or loved one was going to be, and having the ability just to cry through that, or have the anger that through that, about, you know what, you got kind of a crappy deal from life, but also seeing the positives of that, but also dealing with that anger. I think grief, someone shared with me, is a little bit of anxiety about the future and then anger about the past, because depression is about anger of the past, and you know, anxiety is about fear of the future. So it's a mixture of both, because you're in this in between state, betwixt in between, as it were, where you just don't know what to do. I mean, you could be happy one minute, you can be sad, um, you can be in deep anger and also deep sadness. I mean, I think grief is so, like all of our emotions, it's very temporal, right? It all depends on where you are in that moment, your day, your month, your week, what have you. And sometimes it goes away and sometimes it gets re-triggered, can go into remission. There's something else that triggers it, and it comes back on you, and it can come in waves. Like anyone who's had a loss, a major loss of a loved one, it is a process. It is a process. And I think as a parent of a child with mental illness, grief will have different stages. Like I have right now, where I'm grieving is the grief of my daughter going to school like the rest of her friends. And that's a particular loss. It could change, but for right now, it's difficult. I want her to have very similar experiences and enjoy her teens as I did, and other kids do. But I'm warning that might not be for her. Um, and as a parent of a child with mental illness, there are different losses that you will have, and I think you should allow yourself to mourn them, right? Um, could be many things. I mean, I was reading an article about this to prep for this hour, and there was a parent saying that, you know, she mourned the loss of her child no longer really wanting to play sports because it was too much, and it was something that was like a thing for them. That was their thing. That's where their skill was. That was their passion. That's where their joy was. And to see the child walk away from that was very difficult for the parent. But also it comes back to acceptance. And as you grieve, you're allowed to mourn that loss, but it also opens you up for accepting the sweet. We've talked about the bitter a bit, but let's talking about the sweet, those thorns, as part of what I read from Unity. And the sweet is that you can walk beside your loved one. I read this somewhere or heard this somewhere. Instead of walking ahead of your loved one, walk beside them. I think as a parent or potentially a spouse who's trying to manage their life and family with a spouse, you tend to walk ahead because you're trying to be the leader, you're trying to be the guide, you're trying to be the supportive one because you are the one that's helping and supporting them. However, in every situation with them, you don't necessarily have to be the lead. You can actually walk beside them. And with that, that enables you to get out of maybe hovering or worrying or trying to, you know, make things happen, solve a problem that doesn't exist, and helps you to stay in the present moment with them. And it could be a difficult day with them, it could be an easy day with them, but if you're walking beside them, you're finding common ground. So, ways we can walk beside our loved ones could be that you guys watch a movie together, um, whatever the favorites are. I was listening to a podcast on grief, and the speaker was talking about her severely autistic son, and they watch comic book movies, and they love the hero arc, and that's their common language or lingua franca. So when things get tough, they can go back to the hero and comic book archetypes to create that bond. It could be you and your loved one enjoy gardening, right? You have the language of flowers and then nature in common, and all that encompasses. With my child and I, it's a lot about humor and fashion and art and anime. So finding those places where we meet. It could be just taking walks. It could be walking your dog. It could be a love of pets. It could be anything, but finding where you have that common ground. So whenever things get too high or too low, that common ground is sort of that mid ground where you can find and reset and level set. So with that, I'd like to say, stay with me. We're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. I'm Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. Here, guest hosting with Dr. Pat. And as I said, we're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. Stay tuned. Stepping on the intro. Sorry, Benny. This is Brittany Miles on Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I am guest hosting for Dr. Pat today. And what we're talking about is grief as a spiritual practice. And I'm talking about my own struggle with grief. I am talking about something that's been super, super personal to me and sharing it with the world, that I am parenting a child with severe mental illness, and I'm struggling with grief with that. I am hoping that sharing my story will help others who might be hiding in the shadows, because it's not something that's easy to talk about, and you don't always feel like you're going to be accepted, and you don't know necessarily what to do with all your feelings. And I grieve the loss of what I thought her life was going to be. And what I'm working through with grief is what we've been talking about, is accepting what is, and what acceptance looks like, how to find common ground with your loved one, finding a language where you can accept where you are in that moment, in that day. So things get too high or too low, you can always come back to center. So in this segment, it's about talking about, or it's about asking for help. And that's tough. And it's just something that I talk about on my show all the time. Ask for help, ask for help. These are resources, do this. So in the spirit of physician heal thyself, I am actively working on asking for help. I think one of the key things is here, it's like today's show is me coming out of the shadows and talking about it publicly with the world and saying, I need help. I'm struggling. I kind of hid it in other shows in the fall and early this year, where I talk a lot about self-love, self-compassion, excuse me, not knowing what to do next when you have difficult feelings, or how to manage difficult feelings, and dealing with things in that sticky, ooey place. Well, that's what I was really talking about and dealing with. So now I'm being honest. And if you have an issue with this, feel free to call in, and maybe Benny or Jacob could flash the number on. Happy to talk to you, or we could talk about this more on my show. Probably we'll talk about this in our next show in next week. But yeah, get out of the shadows, stop hiding. What I would say is start engaging friends and family. There's fear, there's stigma around mental illness, but don't be afraid. Tell your friends, tell your family what you're going through. They may or may not understand, but open yourself to the possibility that you'll get support. That was one of my fears, is that if I opened myself up and told people all the things that were going on, because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, there's just a lot of fear, a lot of not knowing. And it's tough. It's tough to engage friends and family, but do it because you might get some sympathy. You might get a shoulder to lean on, a shoulder to cry on, and they might be able to point you towards some resources. Explore counseling. We focus a lot on getting the right resources at the right time for our loved ones, but it's rare that we actually look at counseling for ourselves, because we're always in this doing, protective, gotta fix, gotta plan, gotta motivate, gotta activate, because you are a primary or a high secondary caregiver, or you're just a member of the extended family, and you might feel ignored or lost, but you still have grief, like a sibling or a cousin or something. But it's important for you to have a sacred and safe place to talk about that grief. I have a counselor. I do see my counselor. I go in for what I call, tune-ups, touch points, touch-in, sinks, whatever you want to call it, just when things get a little kind of hectic and I feel like it's a little too much. It's a little too much. It's a lot. And what I get from that is, as I said, is that sacred space. It's a place for me to just dump all the stuff and help me to explore my feelings and look at where I am in the grief cycle. And what I do try to get out of those sessions is what's a positive that I can look towards or for. What can I do for myself? And I talk about self-love, self-compassion, self-care, but self-care is looking very different now, where it is for me taking that time to have the time to explore my feelings, but also just having quiet, creating boundaries between myself and my child. Sometimes it can become all consuming, where everyone wants every part of me, but if I don't take care of me, no one else will. I think we all know the analogy of you can't pour from an empty cup. Put your oxygen mask on first. And that's what I'm learning. That's been a really big part of self-care, of just saying to my child, like, this is the time frame. This is what I'm going to do for myself. I need quiet. And within that quiet, it could be me reading social media. It could be reading a book, could be an audiobook. It could be meditation. It could just be staring out the window. Sometimes it's just me walking my dog alone and just looking at nature. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of things. Also looking for support groups. We've been flashing up NAMI.org. They have wonderful, wonderful support groups. You can probably find something in your time zone all around the country. The people there are just like you. They are having similar struggles, similar triumphs, and it's a safe space to share what's going on and have a check-in and a touch point and just learn different coping skills and strategies. sometimes it's just there a place, if you need to just cry, cry, right? But knowing that there are people in the world that are going through what you're going through, and you can feel like legitimized, like what you're feeling, what you're going through is real and important, and it's also sacred. And you've got an army of millions supporting you. If you are spiritual or religious, there are different groups at NAMI that have a spiritual component. There are, whatever your faith, I'm sure between churches, mosques, synagogues, um, whatever have you. I'm sure there's some sort of support that you could get from your religious leadership, or they could point you someplace. There could be counseling that they could provide to you and your family. Also going to your physicians, your primary care physicians, they can potentially point you to different support options, as well as your treatment teams, your psychiatrists, your therapists, hospitals. If your loved one has been hospitalized, they can find or help you find support groups. You could try your Health and Human Services websites all across the country. I'm sure have some free or low cost counseling. So those are places where you can look for support. I think the biggest thing here is asking for help. Don't be afraid. There's hope. I just want to leave you with that. There's a lot of hope. So with that, I'd like you to stay tuned, because we'll be talking more about other types of coping skills that you could use in the moment. And I'm Brittany Miles of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I'm here guest hosting for Dr. Pat. And we're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. And I'm going public with my grief. I am grieving for my mentally ill child. And I want to be able to use our story to support others who might have a similar struggle. So stay tuned, and I'll see you after the break. Welcome back. Welcome back. You're here with Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I am guest hosting here on the Dr. Pat Show today. And we're talking about grief as a spiritual practice. And in this hour, I have gone public with my grief. And I am grieving my mentally ill child. She has severe mental illness, and just grieving a lot of losses of what I thought she would be and become in the future and the now, but also focusing on acceptance of what is and how wonderful and great and shining she is, and the light that she is in the world, and how proud I am to be her mom, to be her parent, because I choose to see her as she is and not as her diagnosis. So we've been talking about acceptance and accepting what is, like I just said, accepting who she is and where we are today, and where we are today may not be where we are tomorrow or where we were yesterday. And coming out of the shadows and hiding, trying to shake off the stigma of mental illness and asking for help, and sharing how I have dealt with this through counseling, through support groups, and engaging my family and friends to talk to them about my struggles, and also helping to educate them about what mental illness is. And now I just want to talk about a few resources. We've been talking about NAMI, which is a wonderful organization, NAMI.org. Also, there's Mental Health America, MHA, I believe .org as well. Those are two great resources that I've been using and supporting. NAMI has great support groups. Many people have pointed me there, and I finally have started attending, and it's been a really great place for me, and it's just a wellspring of support, and I highly recommend it. So there are various coping skills you can use to help manage your grief and deal with your grief. I use RAIN a lot as a tool on my show, which helps with surrendering and accepting what is. And RAIN is a tool that was created by Tara Brach, and it stands for this. R is just recognizing what's going on in that moment for you. Um, A is accepting things as they are. You get to investigate and ask yourself questions about how you're feeling and what's happening, and it'll lead to a host of questions. And you investigate and inspect where you are with care. And then N is nurturing yourself with self care and compassion. So those are really great. It's a great tool to help you get into the now, helps you to acknowledge and accept what is and those emotions that are associated with it. Do you get through everything in just one kind of sequence? No, you just run through it multiple times until you get to where you want to be. You can put it to the side and come back to it. But it's a wonderful tool to help you understand you and where you're feeling. And I have a show called Rain with Dr. Mary Angela McGuire. So you could check that out on my show. So Brittany Miles on Miles to Go, How to Lose to Gain It All. I think other mindfulness practices such as meditation and building a practice, if you only do 2 to 3 minutes a day, helping you to just slow down all the swirl and chaos that is, our monkey mind, finding a way to do that. You could just focus on the breath, the inhale and the exhale. You could use tools such as Insight Timer, which is an app on iOS and Android. And there are various guided and unguided meditations for you. You could use a mindfulness timer. Again, you can find these on iOS and Android that just have a bell that rings either on the half hour or the hour or whatever schedule you want. And in that moment, once that bell dings or chimes, you just take a breath, inhale and exhale, and it grounds you in that present moment. As always, when we're in fear or anxiety or grief, there's a lot of holding of our breath. So taking a time just to inhale and exhale, and that's, as I've been saying, just a meditation in and of itself. You could put your hand on your chest, your hand on your belly, close your eyes, or just lower your eyes and just focus on something out in the distance and just slow down. You don't have to always be doing something. You don't have to always have a solution. You don't have to just be in charge. Try to just relax and take care of yourself. And it's always in that present moment awareness is where you have your greatest power and you have your greatest strength. So always bringing it back to the breath, that will help to, as we talked about at the top of the show, reboot your brain. So taking that inhale, slow down, exhale, and then just sit in the stillness and determine what you need to do now or later, or just do nothing at all. And with that, I want to close and say thank you for everyone that's listening and holding space with me as I talk and walk through, grief and grieving. This has been super cathartic for me. It feels good to come out of the shadows into the light. Sunshine is the best disinfectant for everything. And this is something that I have great, I should say it's something that I will always support for the rest of my life. I was always a mental health advocate, but even more so now. I think it's even more important now that we turn our eyes to mental health given COVID and how it has disrupted and changed our community. Mental health is important as physical health, and we should check in on each other. We should support each other. Be your brother's keeper. Take care of each other, take care of yourself, love each other. And with that, I want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for your listening ears. I'll be talking about this more on my show. And thank you, Dr. Pat, for having me today. I am Brittany Miles, host of Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. And I thank you for your time today. See you on the second and fourth Wednesdays.